Leo Grant rubbed his tired eyes and leaned back in his chair aboard Helios 9, the deep space relay station orbiting just beyond Neptune's blue shadow. The shift had been quiet, as most were. His job was simple: monitor incoming and outgoing signals, log anomalies, and report anything unusual to Earth Central. Nothing ever happened. At least that's what he used to think. The station hummed softly around him, a gentle vibration in the metal floor beneath his boots. Outside the thick viewport, stars glittered in the endless black, cold and distant. Leo checked the time, so 3:47 station time. Another 2 hours until relief arrived. He reached for his coffee, lukewarm in its sealed bulb, and took a slow sip. Then the screen flickered. Not a glitch. Not static. A full override. Every channel, civilian, military, emergency broadcast, all cut to the same feed at once. Red priority flags flashed across his console, but the system offered no warning. It was as if something far more powerful had simply shoved its way in. Leo froze, coffee forgotten. The image showed a massive asteroid, hollowed out and fitted with prison cells stacked like honeycombs. Millions of them, and inside humans, thin, pale, wearing torn gray uniforms. Some pressed hands against transparent walls. Others lay motionless on the floor. The camera panned slowly, showing row after row, level after level, stretching into darkness. A digital counter in the corner read, 7S012S843. Leo's breath caught. He knew that number. It matched the last confirmed count of prisoners taken after the Mars Accord collapse 6 months ago. Earth had lost contact with them weeks after their capture. Everyone assumed they were being held for negotiation. No one imagined this. A voice spoke, deep, calm, alien. It wasn't translated at first, but then subtitles appeared in clean white text. This is the Galactic Conquered. You have defied our sovereignty. You have resisted integration. You have bred chaos among the star systems. This is your lesson. Before Leo could react, before he could even shout into the comm, the view shifted. From high above the asteroid, 4 sleek Virex warships slid into frame. Their hulls gleamed like obsidian, smooth and sharp. Without fanfare, without warning, beams of white-hot plasma lanced down from their underbellies. The asteroid didn't explode. It dissolved. One moment it was there, full of people, full of life, and the next it was gone, replaced by a silent, expanding cloud of vapor and light. The camera held steady. The counter in the corner dropped to 0. Then the feed cut. Silence returned to Helios 9. Only the hum of machinery remained. Leo sat motionless, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. His hands shook as he reached for the emergency override. He typed in the code with trembling fingers, rerouting the entire broadcast directly to Earth Central Command, tagging it with the highest distress priority. Within seconds, confirmation blinked back. Received. Then another message. Broadcast now authorized to all Earth networks. Leo didn't wait. He triggered the station-wide alarm and opened a direct channel to Mission Control. This is Grant on Helios 9. You just saw what I saw. 7 million people, gone on live feed. From the Conquered, his voice cracked. He didn't care. Down on Earth, the world stopped. In Washington, D.C., President Elena Ruiz was reviewing refugee resettlement plans when her aide burst into the Oval Office, face pale. "Madam President, you need to see this now." She followed him to the Situation Room. On every screen, the same footage played on loop. The asteroid, the prisoners, the fire. The silence after Ruiz didn't speak for a full minute. She just watched, her jaw tight, her fingers gripping the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. Then she turned to her communications director. "Get me the UN, full emergency session, and patch me into every major news network. I want every human being on this planet to hear this." Within the hour, her face appeared on every screen on Earth, from Tokyo to Nairobi, from Buenos Aires to Oslo. She stood at a simple podium, no flags behind her, just a dark suit and eyes that held a storm. "Earlier today," she began, her voice low but clear, "the so-called Galactic Conquered murdered 7 million unarmed human prisoners of war. They did it on purpose. They did it in front of us. And they called it a lesson." She paused, letting the weight settle. This was not an act of war. This was genocide. The word hung in the air like smoke. Across the planet, people gathered in streets, in homes, in shelters. Some wept, some shouted. Others stood in stunned silence. For the first time in decades, Earth felt like one people. Not Americans, not Chinese, not Nigerians or Brazilians, but humans. And they had just watched their own slaughtered like animals. In a small apartment in Chicago, a teenager named Marcus rewound the footage again and again, tears streaming down his face. His older sister had been stationed on Mars during the Accord uprising. She never came home. Now he knew why. In Sydney, a retired engineer named Helen turned off her television and walked to her garage. She opened a dusty toolbox and began taking apart an old fusion regulator. She didn't know what she was building yet, but she knew she couldn't just sit and cry. Back on Helios 9, Leo finally stood up. His legs felt weak, but his mind was sharp. He pulled up the raw data from the broadcast, timestamps, signal origin, energy signatures. He saved everything to a secure drive and encrypted it with a code only Earth Command could break. Then he sent it again, just in case. He looked out the viewport once more. The stars seemed colder now, closer, hungrier. But something else stirred inside him too. Not just grief, not just fear, anger, quiet, hard, and unshakable. Down on Earth, President Ruiz ended her address with 3 words. We remember them. And for the first time in a long time, humanity listened as one. In the weeks after the broadcast, Earth changed. Not all at once, but like a slow tide rising. People stopped arguing about borders and taxes and old grudges. They talked about survival, about justice, about what came next. Derek Boone stood on the observation deck of Lunar Command, arms crossed, staring at the blue marble of Earth hanging in the black. He was a lean man with sharp eyes and a voice that never rose above a calm tone, even in crisis. As Earth's top fleet strategist, he'd spent years warning that humanity was unprepared for real war beyond the solar system. No one listened until now. His tablet buzzed. Another report. Concorde patrols had doubled near the edge of human-controlled space. No attacks, just watching, waiting. Derek knew what that meant. They wanted to see how Earth would react. Would humans break apart in panic, or would they fight? He turned and walked down the corridor to the war room. Maps of the solar system covered the walls, dotted with red and green markers. Green for human assets, red for Concorde sightings. The red dots were spreading. We can't hit them, said Captain Lila Moore, her voice tight. Our biggest ship is a refitted cargo hauler with 2 railguns. They have plasma cannons that can melt asteroids. Derek nodded. We don't need to win a fight. We need to make them think twice before starting one. But how? Thousands of miles away in a quiet lab buried beneath the Arizona desert, Maya Lin stared at lines of code scrolling across her screen. She was young with messy hair and glasses that kept slipping down her nose. She wasn't a soldier. She was an astrophysicist who studied signal propagation through warped space. But after the broadcast, she volunteered for Earth Defense Science Division without hesitation. Something about the feed bothered her. The timing, the clarity, the way the plasma beams struck at the exact same millisecond across the entire asteroid. That kind of coordination required perfect synchronization, impossible over interstellar distances unless the signal was sent locally. She ran the data again, and then she saw it. The destruction happened 3 weeks before the broadcast reached Earth. But the signal wasn't delayed by distance alone. It had been held, stored, then released on purpose so Earth would watch it live. Maya's hands went cold. This wasn't just murder. It was theater. A message wrapped in fire. She sent her findings to Lunar Command with a single note. They wanted us to see it. They wanted us to react. Derek read her report 3 times. Then he called her. Can you prove it? He asked. Yes, she said. The metadata doesn't lie. He leaned back in his chair. If the Concorde planned the broadcast, they expected chaos. Maybe even a desperate human counterattack. And if humans attacked blindly, they'd walk right into a trap. We need to stay quiet, he told his team. No grand speeches. No fleet movements. Let them think we're broken. But not everyone agreed. On the other side of the Pacific, in a hidden base carved into the side of an old volcano in Hawaii, Jake Morrow drilled civilians in zero-gravity combat. He was broad-shouldered, with a scar across his left eyebrow and eyes that never smiled anymore. His younger brother, Kyle, had been one of the prisoners on that asteroid. Jake had seen the feed. He knew Kyle was gone. Now he trained teachers, dock workers, even teenagers, anyone willing to learn how to fight in space. They used old mining suits, jury-rigged weapons, and simulators built from scrap. It wasn't an army, not yet, but it was something. "We're not waiting for them to come to us," Jake told his group one evening, floating in the training bay. "If they think we're weak, they'll keep killing us. We show them we bite back." His words spread, quietly, through encrypted channels. In underground forums, people began smuggling parts, fusion cells, targeting chips, even pieces of salvaged alien tech recovered from old skirmishes near Mars. Hidden shipyards in the asteroid belt started humming with activity. Back in Geneva, Chris Avery sat alone in his office late at night. He was Earth's lead diplomat to neutral systems, a man who believed words could stop bullets. He'd spent his life building bridges between species. Now those bridges were burning. He watched the broadcast again, not for the horror, though that never faded, but for the silence after. The conquered didn't gloat. They didn't demand surrender. They just showed what they could do and walked away. That scared him more than anger ever could. He drafted a message to the Silvani Enclave, one of the few non-Virex powers still talking to Earth. "We do not seek war," he wrote, "but we will not be erased. Please mediate." He sent it. Then he poured himself a glass of water and stared out the window at the city lights below. He wondered if anyone was listening. Meanwhile, Maya dug deeper. She traced the broadcast's origin point, not just the asteroid, but the relay node that sent it. It came from a dead zone near Neptune, a place humans rarely visited. But her models showed something odd, a faint echo in the signal, like a whisper bouncing off metal. She cross-referenced old patrol logs. A Virex listening post had been spotted there months ago, then vanished from scans. What if it was still there? What if it held more than just data? She brought her theory to Derek. If we can get inside that station, we might find their command codes, fleet routes, maybe even weaknesses. Derek studied her. "It's a suicide run. Maybe," she said. "But if we learn how they think, we might live long enough to fight another day." He didn't answer right away. Then he nodded. "I'll find someone reckless enough to go." He thought of Jake Morrow. 2 days later, a small team assembled in secret at a dock on the dark side of the moon. Jake would lead. Nina Torres, a sharp-eyed pilot with nerves of steel, would fly the shuttle. Omar Hayes, a quiet engineer who could fix anything with wires and willpower, would handle tech. And Maya would guide them from Earth, feeding them data in real time. They boarded a ship no bigger than a bus, painted black, with no name and no markings, just a hull, engines, and hope. As they launched into the void, Earth held its breath. Not everyone knew about the mission. Not everyone believed it would work. But for the first time since the broadcast, humanity wasn't just grieving. It was moving. Jake looked out the viewport as Neptune grew larger in the distance. He thought of his brother, of the 7 million, of the silence that followed the fire. He wouldn't let that silence be the end. The shuttle slipped into the shadow of a dead moon, heading for a signal only Maya could see. Ahead lay danger, but also answers, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to make the conquered regret ever showing Earth what they could do. Tension grew on Earth like a storm building in silence. Not everyone believed fighting back was the answer. In Geneva, Chris Avery stood before a crowd of diplomats, his voice calm but urgent. He argued that war would only bring more death, that the Concord might still be reasoned with if Earth showed restraint. His words found ears in Europe, South America, even parts of Africa. Peace rallies formed in city squares. People held candles and signs that read, "Remember, don't retaliate," but others saw it differently. In shipyards hidden among the asteroids, workers welded armor onto freighters. In underground labs, scientists tested human-made weapons against captured alien shielding. President Elena Ruiz walked a thin line, honoring the grief of millions while preparing for a war no one wanted, but everyone feared was coming. She approved Project Phoenix in secret. The plan was simple. Take old cargo ships, strip them down, and rebuild them into fast, smart fighters. No heavy guns. No big crews. Just speed, stealth, and AI-guided targeting systems designed by Myelin's team. The ships wouldn't win a head-on battle, but they might survive long enough to strike where it hurt. Derek Boone oversaw the project from Lunar Command. He knew Earth couldn't match the Conquered in firepower, but maybe they could outthink them. Maya's discovery about the neural-linked command hubs gave him an idea. If the Virex fleet relied on a single network to coordinate, breaking that link could blind them, even for a few seconds. In space combat, a few seconds was forever. While Project Phoenix moved forward in shadows, Jake Morrow's team neared their target. The Virex listening post hung in the dark near Neptune, a jagged spire of black metal wrapped in ice. It looked abandoned, but sensors showed faint power readings inside. Nina Torres eased the shuttle into a slow orbit, keeping them in the planet's shadow. "No movement," she whispered over the comms. "No signals. Feels like a tomb." "Tombs can still bite," Jake replied, checking his gear. He wore a modified pressure suit with extra plating over the chest and arms. Omar carried a satchel of tools and a portable decryption unit. They would go in quiet, no weapons unless needed. They docked using magnetic clamps and cycled through the airlock. Inside, the station was cold and dark. Frost coated the walls. Lights flickered weakly in the distance. The air smelled stale, like old metal and ozone. They moved slowly, boots clicking on the grating. Maya's voice came through their earpieces, soft but clear. "I'm reading data pulses from the central core. It's still active. Be careful." Omar found a terminal and plugged in his device. Lines of alien code scrolled across his screen. He frowned. This isn't just a relay. It's a command node. Smaller than the main hubs, but part of the same system. Jake watched the hallway behind them. "How long to copy what we need?"
10 minutes.
Maybe less. As Omar worked, Jake noticed something odd. The prisoners' files, thousands of them, were still stored here. Not deleted. Not erased. Just sitting in a secure folder labeled Final Archive. He opened one at random. A young man from Jakarta.
Captured during the Mars uprising.
Last entry. Subject exhibits strong resistance. Recommend termination as example. Jake's jaw tightened. This wasn't just about war. It was about fear. The Concord didn't just want to win. They wanted to break humanity's spirit. Then alarms blared, red lights flashed. Doors slammed shut down the corridor. Omar cursed. They triggered a remote wipe. "I've got 30 seconds before everything's gone." He hit a button. "Got it. Let's move." They ran back toward the airlock, but the path was blocked. A security drone hovered ahead, its single red eye scanning them. Jake raised his hand slowly. "We're not armed." The drone didn't care. It fired. Jake dove left as a plasma bolt seared the wall. Omar rolled right, pulling a small EMP charge from his belt. He tossed it. The drone sparked and dropped. "Go!" Jake yelled. They sprinted, hearts pounding. Nina met them at the airlock, already powering up the engines. "Hurry. I'm picking up Virex signatures on long-range scan. They know we're here." The shuttle launched just as 2 Concord scouts appeared on the edge of sensor range. Nina pushed the engines hard, weaving through debris fields, using Neptune's gravity to slingshot them toward the inner system. Back on Earth, Maya received the data packet. She decrypted it fast. Inside were schematics of the neural hub network, patrol rotation codes, and something else. A list of planned operations. One entry stood out. Operation Clean Slate. Final resolution of human anomaly within 6 months. Her blood ran cold. The genocide wasn't the end. It was the beginning. She sent the files to Derek and President Ruiz at once. Within hours, emergency meetings filled every secure channel. Project Phoenix moved from testing to full production. Volunteers poured in. Even some of Chris Avery's supporters began to doubt. If the Concord planned to wipe out all of humanity, peace talks were just a delay. Chris himself received a copy of the data. He read it alone in his office, his hands shaking. He had believed the Concord acted in anger, not cold calculation. Now he saw the truth. They never wanted peace. They wanted extinction. That night he sent a final message to the Silvani Enclave. "Tell them we tried. Now we fight." He packed a small bag and vanished. Some said he fled. Others said he went to warn neutral worlds. No one knew for sure. On the moon, Jake and his team debriefed with Derek. Jake's voice was rough. They kept records of every prisoner, like trophies. They wanted us to find this station. They wanted us to see how helpless we are. Derek nodded. Or they wanted us to panic and attack blindly. But we won't. He turned to Maya. "Can we use their own network against them?" She thought for a moment. "If we send a false signal through a captured node, we could trick their fleet into thinking a command ship is under attack. Their whole formation would shift to protect it, leaving real targets open." Derek smiled for the first time in weeks. "Then we give them a ghost to chase. Preparations began. A fake signal generator was built into a derelict freighter. Pilots trained for hit-and-run strikes. Engineers worked day and night to finish the first Phoenix-class ships, but time was short. The Concorde's 6-month clock was ticking. In a quiet moment, Jake stood on the lunar surface looking at Earth. He thought of his brother, of the 7 million, of the file labeled Final Archive. He wouldn't let their names be forgotten, not as victims, but as the reason humanity stood up. The silence of space felt different now, not empty, not peaceful, full of waiting, and soon it would be full of fire. The first strike happened not with a roar but with silence. 3 Phoenix-class ships, painted matte black and no bigger than old cargo tugs, slipped out of the asteroid belt under cover of a solar flare. Nina Torres piloted the lead vessel, her hand steady on the controls. Jake Morrow sat beside her, watching the sensor screen like a hawk. Behind them, 2 more ships followed in perfect formation, their engines running cold to avoid detection. Their target wasn't a planet or a city. It was a conquered supply nexus hidden in the Kuiper Belt, a floating depot where Virex warships refueled and reloaded. According to Maya's data, it was lightly guarded but vital. If Earth could cripple it without firing a shot, they'd prove they weren't helpless. Maya guided them from Earth, her voice calm in their earpieces. "You're entering sensor blind spot. Their patrol sweep resets in 90 seconds. Go now." Nina pushed the throttle. The ships darted forward like shadows. The depot loomed ahead, a cluster of bulbous modules connected by glowing tubes, surrounded by drifting fuel tanks. 2 Virex frigates hovered nearby, their hulls dark and smooth. But Maya's plan didn't require fighting them. It required trickery. Jake activated the fake signal generator. A burst of data shot out, mimicking the distress call of a damaged Virex command hub. The frigates reacted instantly. Their engines flared as they turned toward the false signal, racing to protect what they thought was a high-value asset. For 37 seconds, the depot was unguarded. That was all Earth needed. Small drones, no larger than suitcases, launched from the Phoenix ships. They carried no weapons, only hacking spikes designed by Omar Hayes. They latched onto the depot's main control nodes and flooded the system with corrupted code. Lights flickered across the station. Fuel lines locked. Security doors sealed shut. The entire depot went dark. Then the drones detached and vanished into the void. The Virex frigates returned minutes later, confused. Their scans showed no damage, no intruders, just a system-wide crash. They rebooted the depot, but it would take hours to restore full function. Hours Earth could use. Back on Earth, cheers erupted in Lunar Command. Derek Boone allowed himself a small nod. It wasn't a victory in the old sense, no explosions, no bodies, but it was something better. Proof that humans could outsmart a stronger enemy. News of the strike spread fast, though Earth kept the details secret. People whispered about ghost ships and silent raids. Morale, which had been hanging by a thread, began to rise. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers. Factories ran double shifts. Even children drew pictures of black ships with wings of light. But not everyone celebrated. Chris Avery had not fled. He'd gone to the neutral trade station orbiting Titan, where envoys from a dozen species gathered. He carried a copy of the genocide footage and Maya's data on Operation Clean Slate. He showed it to the Qatari ambassador, a tall being with silver skin and eyes like cracked glass. "They're coming for you next," Chris said quietly. "After Earth, who resists? You, the Sylvani. Anyone who won't bow." The ambassador watched the footage without blinking. When it ended, he simply said, "We know." Chris blinked. "You knew?" "We suspected. But proof changes things." 2 days later, a Qatari freighter docked at Lunar Command. Its captain handed Derek a data chip. Coordinates of 3 hidden Virex weapon caches. And a warning. The Concord is preparing a full fleet mobilization. They think you're still weak. Derek thanked him and passed the intel to Maya. She cross-referenced it with their own maps. One cache was near Saturn's rings, another near Pluto. The third, closest, was drifting just beyond Uranus. President Ruiz faced a choice: strike again and risk full war, or wait and let the Concord grow stronger. She chose to act. This time the mission was riskier. The Uranus cache held plasma cores meant for new warships. Destroying it would delay Concord expansion by months. But it was guarded by a full destroyer. Jake's team was ready. They'd trained for this. Nina had flown sim runs 100 times. Omar had upgraded the drones with EMP pulses. Maya had mapped every blind spot in the destroyer's scan pattern. They launched at dawn, Earth time. The approach was tense. The destroyer hung like a blade in the dark, its sensors sweeping wide arcs. But Maya had found a gap, a narrow cone behind its main engine array where signals bent just enough to hide a small ship. Nina flew through it like a needle through cloth. The drones deployed. They struck the cache's core supports not with fire, but with precise magnetic pulses that destabilized the containment fields. The plasma cores didn't explode. They unraveled, collapsing into harmless energy bursts that lit the ice rings of Uranus in ghostly blue. The destroyer spun around, confused. By the time it locked onto the Phoenix ships, they were already gone, riding a gravity slingshot toward home. This time, the Conquered didn't stay quiet. A message arrived at Earth Central the next day. It showed a Virex admiral, his face sharp and cold. "Your tricks end now. Surrender all military assets. Accept permanent demilitarization, or your worlds will burn like your prisoners did." The ultimatum gave Earth 7 days to decide. Panic flared in some cities. But most people stood firm. They'd seen what surrender meant. They'd watched 7 million vanish in fire. They wouldn't kneel. In Geneva, Chris Avery sent one last message, not to Earth but to every neutral system in the galaxy. He attached the genocide footage, the Operation Clean Slate files, and recordings of the Concord's threats. "This is not just Earth's fight," he wrote. "It is yours too." Then he disappeared again. On the moon, Jake stood with Nina and Omar looking at the stars. They were tired, scared, but not broken. "We bought time," Jake said. "Not enough," Nina replied. "Maybe not," Omar added, "but it's something." Down on Earth, President Ruiz prepared her answer to the Concorde. She wouldn't surrender, but she also wouldn't charge blindly into war. She had another idea, one born from Maya's latest discovery and Chris's quiet courage. The real battle, she realized, wasn't just in space. It was in the minds of 1,000 species watching from the shadows, and humanity was about to speak louder than fire ever could. The Concorde's ultimatum hung over Earth like a blade. 7 days to surrender or face annihilation. Governments debated behind closed doors. Some urged acceptance, fearing total destruction. Others demanded immediate war. But President Elena Ruiz called a global council, not just of leaders, but of scientists, soldiers, teachers, and survivors. She asked one question: what kind of species do we want to be? Jake Morrow stood in the back of the virtual chamber, arms crossed, listening. He'd seen what surrender looked like. He'd read the files from the listening post. Surrender meant slow death, not peace. Maya Lin sat beside him, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. She had another idea, one that didn't involve more ships or bombs. "What if we don't fight them?" she said, her voice quiet but clear. "What if we show everyone else what they really are?" Derek Boone leaned forward. "You mean broadcast the truth again?" "No," Maya said. "Not just to Earth, to every system in the galaxy. Every neutral world, every enslaved colony, every species watching from the dark. Send the genocide footage. Send the Operation Clean Slate files. Send Chris Avery's messages. Let the whole galaxy see the Conquered for what they are. Killers who call murder a lesson." Silence filled the room. Then Ruiz nodded. "Do it." Work began at once. Engineers linked Earth's deep space arrays into one massive transmitter. Maya and her team encoded the data so it could be read by any known alien system. They didn't ask for help. They didn't beg. They simply showed the truth and let others decide. The signal launched on the 6th day. It traveled faster than light, riding quantum ripples through folded space. It reached the Qatari homeworld. It reached the Sylvani rings. It reached mining colonies under Virex rule. In every place it touched, something stirred. On the 7th day, the Conquered expected Earth's answer, surrender or silence. Instead, they got rebellion. First, the Qatari fleet broke from Concorde control. Their ships turned on Virex patrols near the Orion Spur. Then the Sylvani cut off all trade routes, sealing their borders. On the ice moon of Vexus 9, slave laborers rose up, seizing a weapons depot. Within hours, a dozen systems declared independence or open resistance. The Conquered was not just fighting Earth anymore. It was fighting a fire it had lit itself. Back on Earth, Ruiz addressed the world one last time. She stood alone in a simple room. No podium, no flags. "We did not ask for this war," she said. "But we will choose how it ends." Not with more graves, but with truth, her words spread. Not as a call to arms, but as a call to witness. Jake watched the broadcast from Lunar Command. He felt something he hadn't felt in months, hope. Not because the war was over, but because humanity was no longer alone. Maya received a message from an unknown source. It was short. "We stand with you," signed with a Qatari glyph. She smiled for the first time in weeks. Derek studied new star maps now dotted with green. Friendly systems, rebel outposts, allies. The balance was shifting. Not because Earth was strong, but because the conquered had shown its cruelty to all. In the days that followed, ships arrived at the edge of human space. Not conquered warships. Qatari cruisers, Silvani scouts. Even small freighters from freed colonies offering supplies, pilots, and weapons. They didn't speak the same language, but they shared the same fear and the same resolve. Earth opened its docks to them. Engineers shared designs. Pilots trained together. For the first time, humans and aliens worked side by side not as enemies, but as allies. Leo Grant, still stationed on Helios 9, monitored the new traffic. His console lit up with signals in strange tongues, but the intent was clear. "Welcome, thank you. Stand firm." He thought of the 7 million. He thought of the fire that had once filled his screen. Now that same screen showed something else. Ships from a dozen worlds gathering near Neptune, forming a shield around human space. Down on Earth, children played in parks again. Factories still ran, but now they built not just weapons, but shelters, farms, and schools for refugees from rebel worlds. The war wasn't over, but the fear was fading. President Ruiz met with the new alliance leaders in orbit. No grand speeches, just quiet talks about defense lines, shared intel, and protecting the innocent. She made one rule clear: we do not become what they are. We fight to protect life, not to destroy it. Jake volunteered for the next mission, not to attack, but to escort a Qatari medical ship to a wounded colony. Nina flew with him. Omar stayed behind to help build new comms relays with Silvani engineers. As their ship left the dock, Jake looked out at the stars. They no longer seemed cold or hungry. They seemed full of possibility. Maya stood on the lunar surface one night watching Earth rise over the horizon. She thought of the signal she'd sent. Not a weapon, just truth. And truth, it turned out, was the most powerful force in the galaxy. The story of the 7 million was no longer just a tragedy. It was a warning, a spark, a reason for others to rise. And humanity, once seen as weak and divided, was now seen as brave. Not because they had the biggest guns, but because they refused to look away. Leo, back on Helios 9, received a final message from Earth Central. It was simple: "Thank you for seeing first." He saved it. Then he turned back to his console, ready for whatever came next. The stars burned on, but now among them something new burned too, light, not fire. Hope, not fear, and the quiet, unshakable will of a species that chose to stand, not fall, and that was enough.